I'm Lisa Marie Namphy. I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area. I actually work for Intuit. I've worked for Intuit for about a year, also where Monica works. She's worked there a lot longer. But in my community job, I run the San Francisco Bay Area Cloud Native Silicon Valley Cloud Native. I've renamed the user group so many times. It was the first OpenStack user group, then it was one of the first Kubernetes user groups. I love to feature end user stories, and I do a lot of speaking about diversity and inclusion, DE&I, and now, and for the last couple of years, Todd has asked me to MC this conference, which has been really a joy and an honor. And for me, the biggest joy is to be able to meet some of the most amazing people in this industry and in this community. And, you know, as a very passionate, longtime community architect, I am all about community, and I love when I meet other passionate community folks because it's hard. It's a hard job. Organizing and architecting communities, it's often a thankless job, but it's such an important job. And as you've heard from everybody here throughout the day, it's necessary. If we have strong communities, we have strong technology, and if we don't, uplift human beings, we won't have strong communities or strong technologies. So I am super excited to invite back to the stage the folks that you've been hearing from all day. And if you missed their talks, they have been recorded. Each and every one of them was outstanding. And so if you've missed them, it's worth a revisit. I will be revisiting all of them. Because my mind is all over the place when I do these things, and there were so many nuggets in there that I was like, oh wow, I want to think more about that. So I'm going to ask more questions about some of those nuggets. But I think the way I want to start this out is to have everybody here introduce themselves, and as you introduce yourself, talk about a moment today from somebody else's presentation or from your own. That was really impactful for you, and maybe something you want to explore a little bit more on this panel. So let's just start with Amy. First of all, can we give a round of applause to everybody today? Thank you so much.
I'm going to stand up just so
yes,
everyone
please
can
stand
see.
up so everyone in the back can see you.
Yeah.
Yes, they were outstanding
Hi again,
today.
everyone. I'm Amy Egan. I work in community at Vercel. I think for me, the most impactful things were, first of all, Sharon talking about alternative paths. People don't all have the same background. That resonated with me so much. I think it's really important to consider, where other people are coming from and that they have a different history than you have, and how that might impact the way they see technology, the way they learn, the way they experience the world around them. I also liked Jim's talk about kind of the same topic, really. You don't know why somebody's maybe being quiet. They might have lots of reasons why they're afraid to speak up, why it's difficult for them to speak up, and just recognizing, everyone else's background is different from yours, and trying to understand that.
I'll go from outstanding to standing up. Hi, I'm Sharon DeCaro. I currently work at PayPal. I'm based out of the Chicago area. One of the more impactful things for me was also Jim's talk about neurodiversity, specifically that we tend to reward certain behaviors that are gregarious, that are very easy to see, and that it's always a good point to just sort of take the pause and be like, rather than encourage people to be bigger to sort of fit into that mold of success, to make more room for other models of success.
So we're standing, huh? That's what we're doing. Hi, friends. I'm Denitris Farrell, founder and CEO of Culture Refinery, where we help organizations unleash the potential of their most valuable resource, their talent, through leadership development, team building, and training. I would say one of the things that I'm still noodling over is how Dr. Grant was talking about the way that we're thinking about AI and ensuring that it's not just about prompting the tool, the system, but ensuring that the data that's feeding the tool is inclusive enough. And as a non-techie, probably one of the few non-technical people in the room, I've always just been solely focused on, did I get the prompt right? And there's so many things beyond the prompt that need to be considered to ensure that we're getting the output that is going to be helpful for us. So I'm noodling on that.
Thanks, Denny. Hi, everyone. My name is Monica Miyasato, and I work at Intuit alongside Lisa. She leads our DevRel team, and I'm a developer community manager in her team. We have a lot of fun. But something that resonated with me today, I mean, all of the things, like Amy, everyone. I love how you're a professional speaker, like, no joke. And you're encouraged for, just showing up. But Sharon, with the, there's different paths and so much value in folks who might not, have your 4-year college degree in whatever you're doing, and having those voices in the room to guide the products and services that we give out in wherever we're working is so important. So thank you and it was super fun. You made it super fun too.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shakira Grant, and I'm a medical oncologist, and I'm the founder of Cross Global Research and Strategy. So we are a consulting company that works with health tech developers who are building patient-facing AI tools to help bring the clinical subject matter expertise and give you those guardrails that ensure ethical development. Today, my aha moment really came after my talk. This was really one of these things. I showed up at this conference this morning, and this is my first time at this conference, and I did not expect to be giving a talk or leading a discussion group, but it did turn out that way. And after just people who've come up to me and shared about the data issue and helped me to realize that while I'm speaking about this from a clinician and a researcher's lens, that from the developer's side, that you too have struggled with this data issue and trying to find ways that we can, even though we have different backgrounds, that we can essentially tackle this underlying issue of bias in data sets and how that can be propagated. So that's kind of my aha moment. Thanks so much.
That's awesome. And actually, and thank you, Dr. Grant, for agreeing to do this kind of last minute. Nothing like going to your first conference and then being on stage and leading an hour-long discussion group. So, and your talk was amazing. So anyone that missed that talk, make sure that you go back to it. And in fact, I had a question and a comment from your talk. I have asked some folks to, give me some questions if you had them throughout the day. You will also have a chance. I have a microphone here. You'll have a chance to ask your questions live. But a few that came in ahead of the time, and one was for you. And I don't even know if I'm going to pronounce this correctly. But the question was, how prevalent is the use of AI in dermatopathology at the moment? I assume that means something to you. Okay. And do you believe AI can actually close that gap?
Yeah, so dermatopathology, AI is definitely being used. And so what that term means, derma means skin and pathology means disease. And so using AI as a way to detect skin diseases, not only cancer. And this is actually one of the big use cases, especially within dermatology. In terms of closing the gaps in diagnosis, I think that it is possible, but the only way we can do that is if we actually have models that actually are trained on data that sees diverse images. Historically in medicine, many of the images, even when I was trained as a medical student, I hardly saw any anatomy books that actually had persons of color, for instance. And so unless we change the types of images that these models are being trained on, then these disparities in how well they perform in the real world will continue to persist.
Very cool. Okay. And I actually had a question for Amy. You talked also a lot about intentionally building inclusive communities, and actually both you and Denny talked a lot about that. Intentionally making your community inclusive, or it's not going to happen. I mean, I think we kind of understand that, and we understand now the need more than ever to do that. And in a time when there's a lot of pressure not to talk about these things, there's a lot of funding that's going away when we do talk about these things, and we see a lot of people just really afraid. because they don't want to get canceled or lose their funding. How can you be in this climate? How can you be deliberate and intentional about inclusivity?
I think a lot of it is just being deliberate about not excluding people. That's a start, right? We talk about things like different skin color, right? You don't want to have your community represented by one particular group. It's all white men. It's all whatever group that you might focus on that makes everyone else in the room feel like they don't belong. It's also, draw from your own personal community. If you need somebody to help you boost, like, hey, I'm trying to make a thing and I want people to feel welcome, and you have a friend who helps represent that other people are welcome, ask them for some help. Help them show up, and it makes other people feel welcome too. And, it's kind of using people as a prop. That sounds bad, but I think it's not using people as a prop in this negative way. It's using people to show, hey, all of these people have something to share in the conversation, and it's bringing, that forward so that people can see it. And I also think that inclusivity, we're afraid of being canceled because of using certain terminology. You don't have to say inclusion and diversity. You can just do it by example, right? Bringing people in, letting people speak, giving people the stage, listening when people speak to you about a struggle they're having, a fear of coming forward, and just making sure that they feel heard and that they feel safe being heard.
Awesome. And Denny, you also kind of talked a little bit about that. Do you have more you want to say about that, or I'll ask you a different question, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about being intentionally inclusive.
Let me just say that there is nothing political about the term inclusion. We all know what it feels like to walk in a room and feel welcome. And we probably all have those Forrest Gump moment where you walk on the bus and everyone says, can't sit here. And if you've never had that moment, then look around to the folks who nodded and realize that the absence of inclusion is what creates those moments where you show up and no one smiles at you. You can imagine what that feels like. And so when you're talking about how do you be intentional about practicing inclusion, the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. If I want you to smile when I walk in the room, then I'm going to smile at you when you walk in the room. If I want to be inclusive, I'm going to look around the room and say, whose voice am I not hearing? Who's usually loud, but they're quiet today? Why? Who's close to the problem, but not in the room when we're talking about the solution? And why don't we see that as an issue? I'm going to raise my hand, because what happens when we politicize this term inclusion, it gives us the freedom to just abdicate responsibility, to not speak up. It makes it okay for us not to say anything. And when you're representing large organizations and small organizations, that's the cost. So think about Walmart back in the day, a couple years ago, and that daggone Juneteenth ice cream. I bet you if they had a little more inclusion around the room, it wouldn't have made it to market. We all want to be valued. It's a feeling. It's intentionality. If you care, then you'll try to be inclusive. If you don't, even exclusive clubs aim for you to be inclusive when you get in. I'm in a sorority, we're exclusive. But honey, we're a family when we get together, and we still support other sororities. Inclusion is not hard, it's not rocket science. It's a decision that you act on every day. Oh, I'm sorry, you got another question for me.
Yeah, we'll get back to that. No, awesome. And I'm going to stay on this inclusion topic for a minute, but we're going to talk about the data, because Shakira, in your talk, you were talking about getting the data right. And I mean, obviously, when we're talking about misdiagnosing cancer or missing something, even though there was enough data, there should have been enough data, but diagnosing if it's skin color, it's not getting diagnosed, things like that. And you talked about finding the edge cases and making sure that if you don't have a diverse data set, you should have no business using that data set. But how do you, because I know you had to go to Washington, D.C. and, negotiate and lobby for these things to be thought about. Like, how do you do that? How do you make sure that you don't have flawed models, or you're really testing for that, and how do you enforce that and make sure that other people are doing that, and how can we all go back to our jobs and say, hey, wait a minute, we need to test this one more time, or we need to look at that a different way? Like, what would be some advice for us?
Yeah, so I think the first step is to recognize where we are in terms of federal regulation within the US for artificial intelligence. And recently, with the change in administration, there has been more of a move towards deregulation of AI. And especially when you couple that with the efforts around diversity, equity, and inclusion, it makes identifying stuff such as bias in data and trying to fix it less of a priority from a federal perspective. However, the absence of federal leadership in this space does not mean that those who are developing these tools should then shy away from taking this on as a moral imperative. We all have seen, we all are aware of what health inequities do. It really drives poor health outcomes. It keeps those at the margins at the margins. And so this comes down to each developer has to know what is at stake. If you bring a product to market and it is not appropriately tested, then you have issues such as the ones that I pointed out with not missing skin cancer, not allocating resources to certain populations. Things that you can do in this, I think one is awareness. It starts with awareness. It starts with having the tough conversations as you're building your data sets, really questioning where are the biases in the data sets and being upfront and realistic about what that means potentially for your model as you're developing it, as you're training it, and what the potential implications could be on the real world. I think having transparency and with those potential limitations when you bring your product to market, especially as you're selling your product, make sure and say, my data set did not account for XY groups. Therefore, it's possible that this could miss whatever the outcome is. And I think the users then have the ability to add their human oversight to say this model may give bias outputs, and therefore we need to take extra steps to make sure you have that human in the loop, that extra layer of review, especially for those cases that may sit on the edge. Other things I would say for approaching this and practically is just thinking about whether or not moving forward, the idea that, yes, the data that these large models have been trained on historically has a lot of encoded biases, but can we be intentional with our data collection efforts moving forward? And so thinking about ways to pool data, how do you standardize some of the metrics that are needed? For instance, how we characterize race, ethnicity, what do we connect as the minimal number of variables to really build a truly diverse data set? So these are just some initial thoughts, but I would say in summary that this comes down to every individual developer needs to be thinking about bias and the potential harms that it could have, especially if you're developing a healthcare-focused tool.
Absolutely. Thank you. And yet, Denny, back to one of the so many questions that I always want to ask you whenever I hear you speak about things. One of the things you said was AI can't read the room. Leaders need to bring in the emotional part to managing and to build inclusion. I think the quote exactly was overlooked layer to strategic lever. Did I get that right? Okay. Overlooked layer to strategic lever. It reminds me of something you said last year on stage. You get what you make, or you take what you get. I could quote this woman like forever, and I do all the rest of the year. I'm like, well, if you just knew our research triangle culture, culture queen. Yeah. So how do you? And then you said something interesting about the middle layer management is where the innovation comes in, and I just was okay. So can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Okay, that was a lot. Okay, let me find the question. So I always say that the magic is in the middle, because it truly is, because your middle manager touches everything, right? And there's a number of middle managers, and even if you're not people leaders, you're in the middle of the organization, you're sort of mid-career, and so you're still playing that role even without direct leadership. But when you think about what it takes to drive change, to get something done in a company, your entry level, your starting people, they can't drive change. They can do the work. You have to tell them, here's the task, here's your responsibility. They can be brilliant, phenomenal, they can get it done. They rely on their leader, right? We know that 80% of a person's engagement and their satisfaction at work is attributed to their direct manager. People don't leave companies, they leave their bosses. We know all of these things, yet and still we don't ensure that managers are effective. Show of hands if you've had a bad boss. Did they get fired? I know, that's what I'm saying, y'all. And then if you've had an amazing manager, think about what that did for your career. Think about what that did for your life. Think about the impact that you, your team were able to have on the company. It was different. It felt different. It was a totally different vibe. Now imagine if all of us could say we had a great boss. That's when I say the magic's in the middle, and that's the missing link, because if you enable that piece that touches everything, a senior leader can say, we value inclusion. It sounds really good on the website. But if when I walk in the room, no one speaks to me, when I walk in the room, in order for you to listen to me, I have to tout all of my credentials. I'm begging and pleading for airtime. You're ignoring me, talking over me, and taking my ideas as your own. Then that value was trash, right? That was a lie. We're not living it. And the only way that you can ensure that it's being enforced and lived is in the middle. Everyone in an organization, whenever two or more people come together, culture is created. We all create a culture. If we hang out for a little bit, we've created our own little culture. And so every organization has a bunch of subcultures that bubble up to the larger culture. And so every person in this room has a choice to decide what type of person they want to be. Are you a culture taker? You just sit back and take what's given? Are you a culture breaker? The person that's coming in and shaking things up for good or for bad? Or are you intentionally showing up to be a culture maker? I'm here to make it better, to make it more effective, to make it more inclusive. Everyone's playing a role. Most of us are just showing up and being culture takers and taking what we get, because that's what we've been taught, to be a cultural fit, to conform. I want to be a cultural fit for this organization. No, every room you step into, you should be a culture add. I'm not trying to fit. Why do you want to hire me to fit into what you already have? Don't you want me to add some value to it? If not, why am I here? So I don't know if I answered an actual question. Y'all just got me on a soapbox unexpectedly, but did I?
I'm hoping that all my questions end up exactly like that everybody gets to say whatever they actually want to say. Definitely. So these are just leading questions. No, it's all good, and I do want to hear from Monica and Sharon as well. Both your talks, they had some similarities and some community cross sections as well of like seeing a lot of the talks today were about maybe the quietest person in the room is the smartest person in the room, or how do you bring up a community where the community has been largely underrepresented and maybe feels undervalued, or if you happen to be the unique skills but uncommon skills, and how do you find that and make it shine, and then in all of that, I mean, I think there's a lot of fear. I remember when I was early starting out as a community manager. I was scared to death to be part of a community, which is one of the reasons I decided to create one of the largest communities I could, just so I could kind of get over my own fear, feel like I belonged there, and then also make a very safe place for a lot of other people. Because as we know, just with any element of diversity, if you don't build the best and most diverse teams, you don't build the best products, you don't build the best teams. And community exactly the same way. But there's a lot of... when you're overcoming that fear because it's uncomfortable and because you are that unicorn, but also unique, and maybe it's not as socially valued, the skills that we come in with, whether it should be or not. Like, it takes so much more energy, right? Like, a lot more energy. I think people don't really realize the amount of energy that takes, and how so many community leaders are doing it because they see a need that needs to happen because of how they feel themselves and who they are. How do you, so I guess we're talking about burnout here, if I can just like put a category around this. How do you really manage that level of energy that is required, and that, the skills that you have to be doing what you're doing, and keep going? Like, how do you manage all of that?
Okay, first of all, I want to bottle up all of this energy and take it with me everywhere. Love it. Okay. When I was first embarking on my career, my strategy for dealing with fear was just to plow through it. And the best I can say for that is it then gave me an anxiety disorder. So I wouldn't recommend it. Could you please say the second part of the question again? I just want to make sure that my train of thought is intact.
Burnout is an easy term to use for community managers because we've all really experienced
Yes.
it. But it's because of the amount of
Yes.
energy that it takes, because of where we're coming from, and then
Yes.
where you are.
So I'm going to say a lot of magic words real quick. Therapy, boundaries, meditation. There's a lot sort of in there, but I mean it very seriously. I think the first thing that I did for myself that was really critical was saying, I'm a salaried employee. I work 40 hours a week. Full stop. When I got put on on-call shifts, I made sure that there was compensation for that, and an addressed, like, if you get paged overnight, you're encouraged to take the next day off so you're not trying to work through 24 hours. No became an incredibly powerful word, powerful enough that an intern I worked with bought me a no button that cycles through 10 different ways of saying it. All of these things you are going to know yourself better than anyone else around you. And that means you must be your own advocate, which means you must learn how to become your own advocate. And I'm going to say that sucks. It's a painful journey, but when you take it, the reward is incredible.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. So on my end, and just so I put some context, I'm a little bit newer to community. My career was always I was a technical program manager. But so how I deal with burnout, I lead a global ERG that's kind of, they say it's 10% of my day job, but it never is. I'm always going to prioritize my day job. How I guess I get paid for it. And even with my day job, when I do the meetups, when I bring people together, that's what drives me. That's what makes me be okay with burnout, which now that you're talking about therapy and boundaries, I'm like, oh my gosh, you do sound like my therapist. But it's such a labor of love for me, seeing that people that like me, like I was born and raised in another country, and along the way I found opportunities, I found mentors. I was introduced to open source, and that's what really drove me to it. The inclusivity, the openness, how everyone's welcome. That really, really drives me. And to see, full circle. Recently I had my local leaders for our ERG go through a not a mentorship program, but like a leadership program, and 3 of them got promoted. Like that really, like it's about the people and like the communities that you're serving, and seeing the impact, the tangible impact, seeing folks that I met at Latinas in Tech coming to Intuit and like learning about what we do, that really resonates with me, and that's what keeps me going, I guess.
Can I just piggyback real quick? Okay. And I'm gonna be quiet after this. I really do love talking about fear, because fear has gotten a bad name. Okay? We have been told that fear is the bad guy. You want to avoid fear. You need fear. It's a survival skill. It's really necessary. The problem is that we approach fear wrong. We think about fear as if it's a stop sign. We immediately freeze. We don't want to move forward. But we have to reconsider that fear is not a stop sign, more like a yield sign. And yield says slow down. Look around. Identify the risks and then mitigate the ones you can. And then when it's safe, proceed with caution. But y'all say, oops, scary thing, full stop. And we don't move any further because we're afraid. Or we push through blindly and, run smack dab into the tree. Fear didn't do that to you. Your processing of the fear did that to you. And so I want us to get a new relationship with the sense of fear, because fear, like failure, is necessary for success to get where you want to go. But it's how you deal with it that matters. And to the point of burnout, right? I think one of the reasons why we often when it's your natural character to want to make a difference, right? When that's sort of who you are, we tend to do that too blindly and without intention. We just run full speed. And so just like you need to put some intentionality into being inclusive, put some intentionality into the things that you do and the ways that you go about doing them. So if you want to build community, we think that there's one way to do it. You've got to be the gregarious social butterfly and have this event and that event and work the networking room. And if that's not your natural tendency, that's going to wear you down. I have a secret. I am an introvert. Y'all looking at me like I have 5 heads. I promise you I am. I'm going to go sleep as soon as I get out of here. I am an introvert, but I'm not afraid of the stage. So you see, I can do it this way. And so the way that I network, the way that I build community is give me the mic. I say all I need is one mic, right? Give me the mic. But honey, you put me in the audience and expect me to network and shake hands and do all those things. I'm sitting in a corner looking at y'all, waiting for someone to come smile at me, right? You have to figure out what's your way and then do the things your way. So you got to get closer to your why you're doing it, and then the way that you should do it that works works best for you, and then be very intentional about the things that sustain you. We don't think about self-care and beyond self-care, but the systems, the rituals that sustain us, we don't think about them until we need them. But if you think about them before you're afraid, before you're stressed out, before you're burnt out, you say, what are the things that inspire me? What are the actions that get me into flow? What are the things that give me energy? What do I do? What did I do the last 3 times I felt depleted? How can I have that on standby? How can I recognize that I'm getting depleted before I'm completely on E? We don't reflect to figure out those answers, but if we did, then we would have a strategy in place already. So that the first sign of I'm being overwhelmed, I can bring out that no button. At the first sign of I'm tired, I can go take that nap. The sooner you figure that out, the less likely you're going to end up burned out.
This is not an uncommon story. I'm gonna do something here. I did not queue up this question. I didn't queue up any of these questions, but I am going to ask my sisters here. Raise your hand if you are an introvert. I bet you didn't see that one coming. We create these situations so that we have a reason to be here and that we feel good about being here. Like Denny said, give me a mic. But it doesn't mean it's not terrifying. And I think that if I ask the same question of you, which I'm going to right now, raise your hand if you're an introvert.
And say I.
And say I.
Yeah, I said it.
Yeah. I think it's many of us. It's most of us. But we make these assumptions that just because somebody is smiling or is a good speaker or has the game face on, that it's not completely terrifying. So and you never get used to it. People are like, oh, you do this so often. I'm like, it never goes away, that terror. But forge through it. Okay. So now we're going to talk a little bit about online communities because Amy brought this up, and a lot of us community architects went through this during the pandemic when all the things had to be online. But online communities are very, very different than building in-person communities, and most of us in tech anyway, it's both, right? In open source, there's GitHub, there's a Slack community, there's IRC, there's all of these other places where people live and exist, but it is very different. It is open to more people, as you mentioned. It can be more diverse. It's often and almost always more culturally diverse. You've got people from all over the world all of a sudden, and those cultures are extremely different, and you don't always know who they are or where they are, right? There's also less accountability. I mean, I'm not going to say something to someone's face that I'm not going to say it anyway, online or else. But, people feel like they can say something but they won't say it to you if they were looking at you, right? If you're looking at them, there's just that accountability when you're in person. So stuff happens, lots of stuff happens. So how do you manage that? And then how do you talked about the disciplinary measures that sometimes have to be taken, that not always the fun part of community management, and you seem like such a nice person. I can only think that that's like really painful to have to do. So how do you manage through that? How do you manage the online communities? How do you manage through the disciplinary actions? Give us some advice. Who's in this situation, by the way, who runs communities and sometimes has to deal with difficult people? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a few. Okay.
I think, humans naturally want to be nice to each other. So yes, online we can be a little bit anonymous and get a little bit rude and forget that we're talking to real people and not just bots or whatever people get in their heads. Thankfully, a lot of the ways that I enforce the rules is just reminding people that they're not following the rules. I don't have to do anything more than that most of the time. Just, hey, reminder, we have a code of conduct. Here's the link. Please be sure that you're following it the next time you try to participate here. There's going to be a few people who are really angry and they just don't want to follow the rules because they're really angry about something. A lot of these platforms have tools where you can just temporarily silence them and give them time to slow down. It's like a timeout, right? It's you just need a break from this until you calm down and then you're ready to follow the rules again. But online communities, you have to be so intentional. People in a room, we're all going to start talking to each other, even the introverts, all of us. We're here for a reason. We want to talk to all of you. That's why we showed up to an in-person event. But online, people might not know about your community. You have to make sure that you're always reminding people that it exists. You need to be reminding people of what the rules are and what they can expect, and just, essentially inviting people to participate constantly.
Do you ever do things like tell us where you're from? Where are you? I try to just want to do online webinars or do a conference called Cube Crash, and the first thing I ask everybody in the chat is, where are you joining us from? Just so that also all the presenters can realize we have people from 6 continents that are on this viewing thing, that are spending the day with us. How do you kind of get that out there so people can talk about their cultures?
Absolutely. We do live stream events like once or twice a week, and one of the first things that we invite people to do is in the chat, tell us where are you tuning in from, and then we get to see there's somebody who stayed up. It's the middle of the night for them. They're on the other side of the world right now, and they bothered to be here live with us. And just, recognizing that, celebrating it, give them happy emojis and clapping and just calling it out, on the live stream, like, wow, somebody is so dedicated that they're here at a difficult time. And also being sensitive to that. We try to make sure that when we do live events, it's not always in one time zone, convenient to one part of the world. We try to do earlier in my day is later in Europe's day. Later in my day is earlier in Asia Pacific time zones. So we just try to shift it around. My team is global, so we have people who are able to host these events, all over the world. That way everyone has a chance to participate.
Okay. I want to make sure you get to ask your questions. Have you been thinking of them? Do you have questions? Oh, perfect. Okay. Raise your hand so I can kind of see if you. We have a mic. I can run around the room now, but I saw a nod. That was it. Okay. Well. No. And is this on? No. Oh, are you volunteering? Yes. Sure. You don't have to run very far. Easy assignment. You'll succeed. Right there. Thank you, Robert.
My question is to Shakira. You are working with people, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so
Sharon.
because you are working in a fintech, so we are talking about the inclusion and diversity. Then, while creating any product for fintech industry, especially, how we are going to bring this aspect in the product cycle itself? Is there any way, any processes, or any book, anything which you can recommend? Because I never thought like this, my application is going to work in Asia also, as well as in maybe Brazil and some other countries. It's the same product, right? Whenever we create applications. So how you tackle this?
Yeah, so I want to clarify first that right now my role at PayPal is to work on a business-to-business product called Braintree. And I am way down the tech stack. So for the most part, the most inclusion I've had to think about is the size of integers that we get. Generally, though, and this kind of goes back to what I was talking about, is that I see my job as much more than the software I interact with and the code I interact with. I will just stand up in rooms and start asking questions. We had an AMA recently, and I was like, hey, there's a lot of debt going on right now. How are we making sure that we're not just taking advantage of people who are willing to spend money but may not have that money to spend, or may start incurring debt but not know how much debt they're really incurring and what the long-term impact of that is. Some of it is just literally just showing up and saying, this doesn't sound right. This doesn't smell right. I want to know more about what's motivating us to do this, and if there's any other way that we can consider. There's plenty that we do on the sort of actual PayPal app side to be are we making it accessible enough? And are we sort of promoting, helpful activity or certain businesses? But for me, just as an engineer in my own space, it's really just showing up and asking really questions that are important to me, and sort of elbowing in that space wherever I can find it.
Other questions? Yes.
Thank you so much. Wonderful to hear all of you speaking today, and as well as the questions and the responses during the panel session. This goes back to the data part that we were talking about earlier, to Dr. Grant. So, given the sensitivity of what the day and age we are in these days, my question, and this may apply to all of you, is that how do we continue to collect, maintain, and archive some of the data that's around diversity that's being collected, analyzed? We don't want to lose it, right? We don't want to be in a place where it's expunged and not available. I know it's kind of sensitive, but just wanting to put it out there. How do we maintain that and continue to archive it?
Yeah, so that's a really great question around data and maintaining it in these times. I would say this again comes back to the individual company. A lot of what you are seeing play out is from the federal level driving down these mandates. But you as a company, if you run company X, I think it is incumbent on you to actually ensure that you are preserving that data. I don't believe that you should shy away from preserving the data that represents diversity and equity and inclusion and those metrics, because if you do that, the downstream is that when you develop tools and you bring them to market and they don't perform as well, you not only cause potential harm for the users of that tool, but there's significant legal risks. And I think when you talk to, I'm not a legal expert at all, but legal experts, they want to de-risk their products. And even if you have investors, they want to de-risk also, because they want to ensure that if you bring a product to market, that they have the highest chance of getting ROI. And so the way to do that is you have to talk about diversity within the data sets. You have to talk about inclusion and equity. And we didn't talk about this in reality during my talk, but when I talk about equity and access and bias, it's not only at the data level, but it's also thinking about who has access to the particular AI tool or AI-enabled system. And there's a lot of disparities between whether you are in a high resource country, low resource country, even within the US, depending on where you practice, for instance, medicine, areas that have more like federally qualified health systems, they don't have the resources to afford these tools. And so you need to really think about this, because this goes back. It's a people issue, but it's also a legal issue. It's a financial issue. It's a cybersecurity issue. So it touches all of the people in your AI or product development life cycle. And so to me, it's simple. You keep doing and you keep finding ways to preserve that data. If not, the long-term consequence is that you open yourself to financial, legal concerns that will probably end up just ruining many different companies. So,
Any other comments about preserving this data? I bet Nithya back there has some thoughts about how open source could play a role in responsibly preserving a lot of this data. And so that can be our hallway conversation with Nithya later. Not to put you on the spot, Nithya thought she got out of this panel. Oh, one more question? I thought there was another question back there too.
Oh, there are more.
Yeah, lots more, yeah.
Well, super nice to see all wonderful women. I love this panel. Very inspiring, by the way. One question that I have for Dr. Grant, and I love your talk about data and social responsibility and ethically managing this data, is about how you sit in the table, how you are seeing your voice seen, and what are you doing to create that impact that we all want to see, you know, because it's nice to have these panels and diversity and inclusion. I believe the people are here are putting their time because we value and we care. But what about the rest that are not here, right? Like how we are amplifying these voices. I know you care, but I want to hear about what else we can do, what else are you doing, how we can support in these efforts.
yeah, so I would say the first step is really any platform that you have the opportunity to speak on, and it doesn't have to be a formal platform like this, but even just on social media and social channels, to really amplify this issue around bias, equity, diversity. I know it's challenging because of cancel culture and people risk their jobs, etc. And so I'm not telling you to go out there and do anything that will put your job at risk. But I really, in my sense, I'm not tied to a particular institution. I run my own consulting company. And so I use any opportunity I have to always talk about equity, diversity, and especially in the age of artificial intelligence. I think the other aspect is finding community amongst people who are in this space. They may not all be in the AI space, but there's a lot of people still committed to doing work around diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially within the healthcare space. And that is another area that I found as a way to really infuse these ideas and to understand what they themselves are doing to try to keep amplifying this message. And then things that you can do as a community is talk to other people, and when they raise concerns or they try to say, well, you know, bias is not really an issue, counter that and explain to them why this is an issue. I've found by anchoring in real life cases like this, the dermatology example and the resource allocation, it helps to open people's eyes about why this is important. And sometimes when we think about maybe if 20% of people are in the room and they are believers in what we are saying and wondering about the 80%, sometimes it's really just a knowledge gap. It really comes down to people not understanding the impact. And I've learned that if I lead with a story that translates into real, tangible impact on a person's life, that allows me to really get the ear of those who may be otherwise resistant to the idea of leading with this is an equity issue or a bias issue. So I think one of the panelists mentioned this, and sometimes it's not about just using the terms, but it's about defining what you're doing and having that real human tie. And sometimes that is all you really need to try to really get your foot in the door for people to really understand that this matters and this is why they need to take it seriously.
All right, I think we have time for at least one more, and we have a hand up there.
Thank you. I wanted to ask a follow-up to Dr. Grant, although I think there may be other examples as well, that your example about the cost allocation or the care allocation. One of the things that stood out to me is that by training the AI and using that data, when you looked at the results, you said there's strong bias in that original data where you're measuring where we've already spent money and then assuming that that is how we always want to spend money. And like similarly, I've seen it kind of in hiring where you get we've always had success hiring these type of people, therefore we're going to keep having success by doing the same. Do you guys have any strategies for like specifically addressing that? Or what do you do when the result that you bring is, I found bias in what you all have been doing by training my AI on what you were doing. Now I suggest that you do differently in the future, whether or not the AI told us. You know what I mean? I feel like that's a tough conversation to end up in when what you've uncovered is something that they may not like to look at in the mirror. So, thank you.
Yeah, it's a really difficult position to be in, especially when bias is uncovered, especially the paper that I mentioned. If you look it up, it has like over 3,000 citations and like thousands of views on this. It's been reported on a lot since 2019. One of the key things when this comes up is we need to not shy away from when we identify bias in a potential model and actually speak up about it, because the potential harm if you do not speak up could be major, especially on a population level. So I like to think of this, that AI is great, but AI has a way of scaling the things that we previously couldn't see before, and it magnifies it many, many, many different fold than we could have ever imagined. So when you think about how to counteract this is one, speaking up if you identify that this model is potentially biased, and then try to figure out how can we go back and try to remedy this, right? And that's the hard part about it. But I think acknowledging first is the first step. And then the other is, you spoke to this, which is the need for human oversight. So if you get a result from AI, a model predicts something, especially again, going back to healthcare, and it just seems off, don't just say, oh, the AI said it, so therefore I'm going to take it. This is where you need that human AI teaming to come into play, and there needs to be human oversight. Recently, there was this debate, I did this post on LinkedIn about human in the loop versus human on the loop. And the difference is the idea that when you're in the loop, it means that the human is kind of driving the decisions. On the loop means that you step back and you let AI do what it does best and make the decisions, and then the human takes responsibility. So you can debate that difference in the role you want to play, but I think the ultimate is that you need to have human oversight, especially for use cases that directly impact people's lives, directly impact population level, even out down to the individual level. So human AI teaming is important.
Can I just, with a non-technical lens, right? Because bias is human. Bias is a natural part of our brain. All of us have it. AI didn't bring the bias. The humans that collected the data initially brought the bias. So versus how do we call out the bias in the data? Can I offer, if you're here, you recognize the value of diversity and inclusion and all those things, you know that bias exists. So I want to offer to you to automatically assume that the data is biased, because it is. It was collected by humans. So if we automatically assume that the data is biased and we approach it trying to call out and pull out and recognize the bias, and until we're, 20, 30 years from now, and we've intentionally gathered and sourced bias without, or source data without the bias, until we've been intentional about that, which we've not, because we're still defining inclusion for folks right now. So until we've done that, right, then we can safely assume that the data is biased. How biased and all the things and how we can prompt around and what we can add to the mix to de-bias it a little bit, cool. But the assumption is it's biased.
I agree. And I know you had a question. I want to make sure we can get. Do you have time, everyone, for one more question? I know I'm keeping you between the cocktail hour and new stacks, drinks, and things. But if you have time, I want to make sure this gentleman gets his question asked. Not to put the pressure on you with the last question, make it a really, really good one.
So what I'm wondering, there was a lot of hope and promise, I'll say 10, 20 years ago, that tech was going to help us scale and advance and improve human systems. Do you feel like we're hitting a diminishing point with that, and we need to be back off tech in some situations, or individually, are y'all still like 3 sheets to the wind, all the tech? This is definitely going to solve a lot of these problems at the end of the day.
So I love this because I believe that tech will solve the issues. However, it's not tech in isolation, that this is a tech plus human issue. So when I boil it down, this is really about change management, as well as pairing with having the most advanced tools. And the reason this is important is you can bring as much technology to the market. If you do not focus on human behaviors and how people use the technology, how they interact with it, how they interpret the findings, how you build trust between the models and what they do, then the tech is not going to get adopted, and it will not live true to see the promises that have been made. So I believe tech could be the solution, but tech also needs to be paired with that human behavior element to help really move the needle forward.
One of my favorite things to say on the job is solve technology problems with technology and solve human problems with humans. When we start to cross the wires, that's when things start to get really hinky. So that's usually the line that I try to draw, is like, if there's something truly to be automated and like it's just all like really, really gritty, it's like, great, go do that. When it becomes, I need to talk to the AI to figure out what I'm eating for dinner, it's like, okay, like, yes, it can go through the 80 million, results it found on eating dinner and figure out something that might work for you. But you can also just ask people around you. And so that's usually the dividing line that I try to make.
Yeah, I agree. I think you can't take the human out of solving human problems. We can use technology to help us, but ultimately humans still need to be involved. So I think tech can make us more efficient if we're careful about it, but humans will always need to be involved in solving human problems.
I think that was a theme throughout the whole day. Jim's not here, but if you remember his talk, he talked about designing data that respects the human. He had a quote that I absolutely loved. He said, "If we think people are interchangeable, we build for noise. If we think people are unique, we build for signal." Clarity isn't etiquette; it's engineering for cognition. His whole talk was about that as well. And I think we are going to wrap it up here. But I I think all of these themes that you brought up, that they've brought up all day, are so important. We talked about responsible and ethical community building, responsible and ethical leadership, responsible and ethical AI. And the reason we come together on days like this is to have these conversations. And I think closing on this theme that really at the heart of your question, making sure that however we're developing the software, however we're wrangling AI, this $1 trillion part of our industry now, we are doing things deliberately with the right intentions, but we are always, always, always keeping humanity at the center. If we don't do that, help us, please. So with that, I'm going to ask all of you to help me celebrate my birthday, which was yesterday, as I pointed out at the beginning. Yes, and to join me out in the, I'm going to get, if it's not raining, I'm going to guess it's where it always has been, which is just right outside. The New Stack, our nice friends at the New Stack have sponsored a happy hour for us now, and it goes until 7 p.m. So I hope you will all join me out there for a drink.